For this project you're going to need a selection of clamps. You could use pegs if you don't have clamps, 10-second studio tools, a pointy tool and a couple of wheels to add texture, the PaperArtsy Grunge Flower die and leaf which you buy together as a set, black StazOn, Hot Pick 1004 which is a PaperArtsy stamp, acrylic block, glossy accents, and most important you're going to need some metal, humungo tape and cardstock. You'll also need your Big Shot machine. Now when I use the Big Shot I try to keep it so that I have one platform which is just used for all the die cutting, so that's the one that gets all cut up and messy, and the other platform I keep clean. You'll see why we do it that way in a minute. First thing you're going to do is die cut your grunge flower. So you need to stick your layers of metal, humungo and cardstock together, and then you can put your die on top of that. Now we recommend that you put your die so that it's blade side down into the cutting mat. Then I can see exactly where the dies are. You're going to need 3 of the flowers die cut, and you will also need to have maybe 2 or 3 of the leaf. And the great thing is that that just pops straight out so that you've got your card on the back, humungo tape in the middle, and it easily pops out of the die. Once you've die cut all your flowers, you'll have a waste piece of metal. You can arrange your flowers on the base plate, the base piece of acrylic, and this is the reason why I like to keep my top part clean, because I want to flatten these pieces of metal. When you die cut, they have a slightly raised part to the metal. There's a slightly raised sort of lumpy section. So I need to flatten that so I can stamp the image on top of it really nicely. We're just going to pop all those straight through the machine. Once you've die cut your flower, you'll realise that there's a notch in one of the petals of the die, and that image of that notch is actually going to transfer onto the metal if you're die cutting metal. The reason is metal's a nice soft malleable surface, so you do get that image translating. You probably won't see it in the video here, but once you do it yourself you'll actually see that notch. The reason for the notch is so that you know which way to orient your stamp when you stamp on top of the metal. And the notch matches this petal here. There's some Roman numerals in the clock, and that petal there is the one that matches the notch. And what I do is mark the back of my acrylic block. I mark on my stamp an arrow which shows me where I need to stamp the petal. So go ahead and line up your stamp on top of your metal flower. Ink it up with StazOn ink, which is the perfect ink for using on top of smooth, shiny surfaces like metal. And the leaves as well. So what you want to do is use your 10-second studio tools to add different texture to the piece of metal. So you can see that I've used this tool, which is a nice zigzag edge around the very edge of the petal, and then I've used the tiny dot wheel, which is a really small fine dot, and that adds some nice little detail along the music lines and around the edge of the clock face. You might want to add some little dots to some of these checkerboards around the edges. It's just a way of catching the light when the flower's made up. The first thing I'm going to do is make a base for the flower to build it on. So I like to have a couple of leaves in there, so you just want to put a little bit of glossy accents on the bottom of your leaves, and you could have 2, maybe 3, and then we're going to stick those to a base flower. So that can be that one there, and we're just going to set that aside. So with one of your flowers you need to cut a slit right down towards the center of the opposite side there, and this is going to get pulled across and glued in position. So a good thing to do is to cut the little base bit off the back of that flower there. So I just cut it from point to point, a small amount of glossy accents on the back there, and we're going to stick it down and clamp it. So that shouldn't take too long to set up. For your second one, you want to cut away one of these petals like that. Again, we cut away the back part of that one, and this is going to stick down onto there. And the last one, we're going to cut away two sections. Again, we just simply cut that back portion off there, form the metal to go around, and glue it in place. So now we've got the two petal section. I find if you just form it into a cone shape, sort of a bit like an ice cream there, so use a paintbrush, form that into a cone shape around the edge of the paintbrush. Then just let it roll around, and as it rolls around, just encourage that to go to the back. With the final small piece here, again, you can roll that around. If you want the card showing, then you can put the card bit so that goes in the centre. If you want the metal bit showing, then roll it the other opposite direction. And again, just encourage that to go around. And you might want to give it a bit of a tweak so that maybe one section folds back. So this one is just going to get slipped inside that one. If you want, you can put a little bit of glue in there to hold it in place. And then we also probably should put a little bit of glue along here to hold that guy. So we're going to clamp that one as well. So now it's time to assemble our flower. We started off with 4 flowers, and the 4th one was used to make the base with a couple of the leaves. Now what we're going to do is build the flower on this base. So unclamp the first one. If you want this to sit flat on here, then you're going to need to cut a portion off the back here of this cone shape. So you just take your scissors and cut away. If you want, you can kind of fold it in half, but just see how you go. You don't need to take loads off there. So I like to just sort of poke down in the middle there to create a flat section. And then you just have to take each of the petals and lightly fold them back. So that's the reason why you cut the section off the back of the one that you doubled over, so that it sits really nicely on top. But if silicone glue is quite a good glue to use, because it's a slow glue to dry. It means that you can actually tweak around with these and a nice bit of glue comes through there ready for the next one. Okay, we go to the next one, same thing, cut a bit off the back, cut a little bit more, fold your petals down, just sort of squish it down a bit, and that's ready to sit on top of the next one. As you get down through the layers, you might find that you need to cut a little bit more off each time. It's really personal preference how much you want these to sit flat, how flat you want them to be. Another way you can make them sit a little bit flatter is to actually cut down in between each petal a little bit. Reach that one. And we'll put a little bit more glue in there. You're never going to see the glue, so it's better to have more than you think, and we'll offset that. The last little section, this guy, he needs to go in there, so we have to cut quite a sizable chunk off that. Again, a tad more glue if you need it, and stick that in there. And that's it, you're done. A gorgeous grunge flower die rose.